Welcome to KAWO's ultimate introduction to social media in China. In this video, we're going to be looking at the incredible ecosystem of e-commerce in China and also the massive growth of mobile payments. China is arguably the world's most advanced market when it comes to e-commerce. It feels like people can buy almost anything and everything online. We've tried to divide this section into three main categories to help you have a better understanding of e-commerce because it is very different to the way it works in the West. The first one is selling direct. Now this is the equivalent of brands having their own e-commerce website, and this is a lot more common in the West than it is here in China. So selling direct can work in multiple ways. Either they have their own website that you can visit, or it could be a web store inside of WeChat that is owned and controlled by the brand. The next one is marketplaces. Now, we've previously talked quite a bit about Alibaba in these videos, and Alibaba really dominates when it comes to the marketplaces. And we're going to go into detail in each of these different marketplaces and cover the various benefits and demographics they appeal to. The third one is social commerce, and this is a really interesting one because it represents quite a shift in the way e-commerce is working from the more traditional ad-driven, traffic-driven, conversion-focused model to something driven a lot more by content. There are several players in this area, from Douyin, WeChat, and Little Red Book probably being one of the most popular. But there's also Taobao Live, which focuses around live streaming. So let's get started by taking a look at this new shift in e-commerce. So on the right here, we have the traditional model of e-commerce where we drive traffic to a site or a landing page, and then we try and present enough information to develop trust with the user to encourage them to convert, buy the product, add it to their cart, check out, pay, etc. With the content-driven model of e-commerce, we're dealing with a user who doesn't necessarily know what they want and more wants to be told what it is they should buy. And this is where platforms like Xiaohongshu, which we're going to cover in a few slides, is a lot more of a content-driven ecosystem. This is true of WeChat too, where 40% of sales on WeChat are driven by content created within the platform. Also, when it comes to live streaming, almost the equivalent of probably shopping channels or something like that in the modern age, we have people who just sit there, even in their homes or in a studio they've built themselves, and present products and talk about them and tell you why you should buy them and provide direct links to purchase them immediately. This model of e-commerce is still evolving, but it's definitely something that's become more popular with younger generations who seem to want to be told what it is they should be buying rather than necessarily do the research themselves or to go out with a specific intent to purchase something. Before we get into the actual platforms, let's have a look at the breakdown of the market. And I think you'll instantly see this chart tells the story. Taobao and Tmall dominate with 56% of the merchandise value on e-commerce in China. Many brands are forced to play within that ecosystem. Next, we have JD.com, which is probably one of the main rivalries to the Alibaba dominance of e-commerce. Much more sort of tech-focused and a slightly more niche platform. Then, third place, we have Pinduoduo, a much more recent entrant to the market, more focused on group buying and in lower tier cities. Interestingly, we're not able to tell you exactly how much of e-commerce happens on WeChat because it's actually fragmented into many different stores. Brands like Zara have their own WeChat store and we don't get to see that volume. But from the research we've done, talking to people inside the industry and the data we were able to get together, we think it's roughly around 7% of e-commerce value happens within the WeChat ecosystem. After that, you've got Suning and then a few other players. But you can see that e-commerce really is dominated by the £800 gorilla of Alibaba in this ecosystem. If you want to know more about e-commerce, we highly recommend Walk the Chat. We got this great quote from Jenny here, and they create awesome content, and they really are the experts in e-commerce. So definitely check them out if it's an area you want to learn more about. Let's start by looking at Taobao. So Taobao is essentially like eBay for China, and it was the first platform Alibaba built after their very successful B2B overseas platform. Taobao enabled a whole generation of small businesses across China to start selling online and access new customers, all with money ready to spend. One of the problems on Taobao, though, was trust. It made it harder for people to know what was real and what was fake. And this is where Alibaba launched Tmall. So Tmall was the opportunity for a brand to establish a credible store. It's more expensive to get started with Tmall. It appeals to maybe a slightly more sophisticated demographic, and it is more branded content. It's higher transaction values. To learn more about Tmall, we've put together these quick screenshots here. So Tmall has a homepage where you can see lots of different promotions, and obviously you have to pay to be on that homepage. You might remember in a previous video we covered the fact that the Alibaba ecosystem really makes a lot of money in digital ads, and here is where a lot of it comes from. You then can have your own storefront, which you can present your products on. Here we've used a screenshot of Apple's store inside Tmall. And then the actual product page itself, where you can see the details of the product and add it to your basket and check out. It's interesting to note that as much as 80% of the traffic in Tmall that converts actually lands directly on the product page. So there are obviously lots of different ways that you have to make sure that your users are being exposed to your products in other areas to get them to visit your product pages. If you want to understand more about Tmall, please check out this guide from Walk the Chat. It really is a great primer on the ecosystem. It's important to note that Tmall is not a cheap place to get started. A lot of brands will probably be paying more in fees to their Tmall partner and advertising than they will make in revenue in the first year. You really have to be spending quite a lot to see good returns on Tmall because you're playing within the Alibaba ecosystem. Next, we have JD.com. Again, it's a platform. I guess you could think of it most similarly to something like Newegg or Amazon in the West. Quite tech-focused, slightly more male demographic than other e-commerce platforms, and quite popular in top-tier cities. There are all sorts of other ways you can be inside the JD ecosystem, including they have their own mini programs, and they recently launched Burger King's mini program inside their ecosystem. So yet again, another example of how tech companies really don't see any limits on what areas that they can get into here in China. Okay, so Pinduoduo, a really interesting one. We probably remember a few years ago the immense trend of group buying with Groupon and the like. Well, Pinduoduo is a little bit like that. There's a gamification aspect to it. It's very popular in third and fourth tier cities where you have to share the deals that you want, and you will get a cheaper price if you get more of your friends to join in with those deals. I think Pinduoduo is still at quite a relatively newer level of their development, and it's yet to see whether or not this business model is going to scale, but it's certainly generating a lot of traction right now, although its revenue numbers are quite significantly behind that of the main platforms. If you want to learn more about Pinduoduo, Jing Daily wrote a really good article here all about Pinduoduo and covering the options for brands there. Okay, Little Red Book, where do we start? This platform really is a phenomenon, and it's incredibly popular with luxury, cosmetic, and beauty brands because of its very targeted audience. 86% of the active users are women, and they're most heavily skewed towards first-tier cities. They're people with quite a lot of buying power and quite a heavy interest in luxury brands and also cosmetic products. To think of Xiaohongshu, you've really got to think of it as a combination of maybe Pinterest and Shopify. It is possible for brands to have their own store on the platform, but most of the content is actually created by users, pinning products and sharing reviews. let's have a look at the actual platform itself. So here on this slide, the first screenshot you can see is of the homepage, which looks a bit more like a traditional e-commerce platform. But actually most of the content here is reviews of products shared by users. It's possible for brands to have their own profile, as you can see in the next screenshot with this brand of Yves Saint Laurent, and you can see posts they've created to update their fans about the products that they're releasing and changes. And then in the final screenshot, you can see a product note which describes a product and somebody's experience with it. This is the major form of content on this platform. And actually one of the things brands can do is pin reviews of their products to their homepage to showcase them for their users. On this next side, we can see a brand profile for L'Oreal, and you can see there they've shared some content and updates for their followers. You can also see the profile for Kim Kardashian, so it's quite possible for KOLs on this platform to have their own profiles, to share reviews of products that they're being paid to promote, and actually also to do live streaming and events through the platform. Okay, moving on to a recommendation here. We think this guide that Linkfluence produced that helps you to understand what is Little Red Book is really a great way to get into the details and how you as a brand might be able to leverage it. Right, moving on to WeChat e-commerce. So WeChat e-commerce is really interesting because you really have a lot of options. You can actually build your own store completely from scratch by hiring a developer and integrate directly into WeChat's APIs using their developer docs. But there are a couple of platforms that provide you out-of-the-box stores that might be a great place for brands to get started. These are probably the two main ones. So WeiDian, although named in a similar way to WeChat, is actually not necessarily strongly affiliated with the company, although Tencent has invested in them. We just don't know how much. WeiDian is probably the more mass market way to do it. They have many stores on their platform, and they provide a great out-of-the-box solution to create your own WeChat store. Maybe slightly more upmarket is Youzan, and actually Youzan, although they have a smaller number of stores, only around 300,000, they actually provide quite a lot more service and options around the stores, and also they can create you stores on multiple platforms, and they provide powerful ways to sync your inventory. Big Western brands such as the NBA use Youzan for their e-commerce in China. Right, on this next slide, we've found this great guide from Walk the Chat. They really are e-commerce experts in China. You should follow their WeChat account. And here they've created a great guide on how to create a WeChat store on WeiDian. Moving on to Taobao Live. Live streaming, as you might have heard, is really a phenomenon in China. I guess the easiest way to think of it is sort of a replacement for maybe the shopping channels or infomercials that you might have seen on TV in the West. People sitting in their room or wherever they are able to share content all about the products that they recommend and give you detailed reviews. And consumers really love to be told what to buy. A lot of consumers are looking for advice, and this really is part of this sort of newer wave of content-driven commerce that we covered a few slides before. Taobao Live is probably the biggest player in this space because they're directly integrated into Alibaba's ecosystem and into Taobao itself. The age profile is slightly more skewed towards women and more towards younger women too. One of the key things that drives e-commerce in China is e-commerce festivals. You might be familiar with Cyber Monday in the West, or maybe Black Friday sales or the New Year's sales in Europe and North America. In China, there is an e-commerce festival almost every single month of the year, and they drive sales which dwarf the ones in the West. The biggest of all is probably 11/11, or Singles Day as it's known, on the 11th of November, and this has become a huge event with a live gala and Western celebrities fly in to perform, and Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, has even known himself to have a bit of fun at that event. Really, when you're looking at trying to drive sales in China, you really have to think about these e-commerce festivals and really plan quite a lot for them. One of the really interesting things we learned during our research was that actually, because Chinese consumers find customer service such an important part of their buying journey, it's actually really important to make sure you have enough customer service staff on these e-commerce festivals to really answer the questions that people are going to be asking when you get this huge influx of orders as everybody's trying to buy products and get great deals. Last in this video, we're going to cover mobile payments. China really is ahead of a lot of the world when it comes to mobile payments. As that graph in the middle really shows, there's been an incredible growth in mobile payments. I actually just got back from the far west of China, where I was traveling high up in the mountains, and every tiny store I went to in every little village accepted either Alipay or WeChat Pay, and in most cases both of them. I even stopped on the top of a mountain at one point, and a guy was trying to sell me skewers of yak meat, and even he was able to take payment by Alipay. I literally haven't used cash in China in over 5 years. So when I have to go back to my home country and take out money from an ATM, it really feels like stepping back in the past. As you can see, this ecosystem is dominated by two players, Alipay and WeChat Pay from Tencent. They have integrated their payment methods deeply into their ecosystems. So if you want to buy something on Taobao and Tmall, it's going to be using Alipay. And if you want to buy services through WeChat or use your payments for e-commerce, it's going to be WeChat Pay. That remaining 6% makes up everybody else you can think of, from China's main card processor, UnionPay, all the way through to platforms like Apple Pay and WeChat Pay, which really have made very little penetration into this market. Mobile payments are incredibly convenient for Chinese consumers, and for Western brands, if you want to take orders on your website or through your app, wherever you are in the world really, you should really consider implementing mobile payments from these two companies onto your site. And they provide lots of different ways to do this. We'll put the links in the description below. To watch the next video in this series about video and live streaming in China, just click up there. To download the full PDF with all of the slides from this series, please just take a look down in the description below and you'll find the link. KAWO is a software company that helps brands and teams in China and all over the world to achieve success on social media in China. To learn more about our software platform, just check out the video over there.